I opened the front door at 5:07 a.m., and the damp pine scent from the Allegheny River wafted up the hillside. October in Greyhaven is never this quiet. Normally at this hour, my neighbor would fire up his Ford F-150, letting the engine rumble while he sips his black coffee. Marla, the diner owner at the corner of Main Street, always flips the open sign before 6 to catch the truckers passing through town. But this morning, the whole slope was silent, like it was holding its breath. I'm a postal worker, which means I know who wakes up when, who still gets the paper instead of reading news on their phone, and whose mailbox is wobbling and needs a new nail. This job has taught me to spot something off before I can even name it. Main Street looked the same, the red brick buildings, the barber shop, Barney's Auto Repair with its sign, "We fix what your YouTube broke." But something in the air made my skin prickle, like walking into an auditorium after a show, with the chairs and tables still in place, lights still on, but not a soul around. I walked along the sidewalk. The diner door was ajar, the bell above it didn't jingle because no one had passed through. The smell of bacon and scorched coffee still hung thick, like an apology. A ceramic mug with the Route 62 logo sat on the counter. Steam rising faintly, just enough to make you wonder how long ago the drinker left. The radio on the shelf played an old country song, the singer's voice stretching the word home thin as tissue paper. I called out Marla, no answer. At the window booth, I saw a handwritten check, the pen stroke stopping mid-word on hash browns. Something had interrupted the writer. In the kitchen, the skillet was still warm, butter melted. I turned off the stove, unplugged the toaster, and went back to the counter. Next to the tip jar stuffed with dollar bills, a yellow sticky note was slapped on, "Closed temporarily, FEMA training." The word FEMA was followed by a question mark, as if the writer didn't quite believe it themselves. I left the diner and headed to the post office. On the steps, there was a grocery bag with unopened milk and cereal. On the street, wide tire marks, like from a bus, showed where it had stopped and pulled away. No snow yet. But the morning dew was enough to reveal dust swept into two parallel tracks. At the intersection, the traffic light blinked yellow as usual, except now there was no one left to yield to. I thought of my mom. She doesn't drive anymore and often asks me to pick up her cough medicine. I turned onto Cherry Street and her pale blue wooden house appeared behind the maple trees. The door was closed, curtains drawn, but the TV inside was still on, tuned to the Weather Channel. She keeps her key under the welcome mat, same as she has for decades. I opened the door and realized something had slipped out of reach. This silence wasn't random, it was organized. On the dining table were two bowls, one for her, one for me, our Wednesday routine. Next to them was her old kitchen timer, still ticking, set to 5:32. She used it to remember her meds. In the sink, a glass had a smudge of lipstick. I called out, "Mom, it's me." My own voice echoed back like a stranger's. I ran to her bedroom. The bed was made, blankets folded neatly, but the dresser drawer was slightly open, as if she'd changed in a hurry. On the nightstand was a flyer, Emergency Drill Resident Instructions, with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency logo. No date or time, just the words "unannounced training to measure response capability." Measure what? I wondered, my stomach tightening. If it's a drill, who announced it, through what channel, and why didn't I hear about it? I'm a postal worker. Every drill involves mail, flyers, or notices. That absence flipped a switch in my head. I went to the garage. Grabbed the old walkie-talkie I used to listen to the traffic cruise channel during the 4th of July parade. I turned the dial, static crackling through the air before going silent. Then a dry male voice came through on channel 7. L3 clear. All units regroup at Quarry Gate. Quarry Gate, the entrance to the old Greyhaven limestone quarry, shut down since 2001. Kids sneak there to light bonfires by the fence and take pictures of graffiti. In recent years, there were rumors a tech company wanted to turn the quarry's depths into a data center, cooled naturally and isolated. Rumors, we live on rumors, like any small East Coast town caught between industrial decline and Silicon Valley dreams. I jotted down the frequency, stuffed the walkie-talkie in my jacket, and drove toward the quarry. Leaving Main Street, I saw more sticky notes slapped on telephone poles. "See you soon, FEMA drill." Written in different hands, like people were told to write them before leaving. There were Domino's pizza boxes on some porches, still warm. The delivery driver must have dropped them off just as the bus arrived. No dogs barked, no laughter, just the sound of my tires humming on the pavement, and in my ear the static of Channel 7 cutting in and out another voice. Ensure no image leaks, L3 at capacity, awaiting True 3 confirmation. At capacity, I repeated, staring down the road cutting through the reddening maples. A thought brushed my spine. They're not just taking people, they're counting us. And this morning in Greyhaven, they counted enough. The limestone quarry lies north of town, past the narrow steel bridge built by the WPA during the Great Depression. Halfway across the bridge, I paused. Below, a trail of white foam stretched along the river, as if a patrol boat had just passed without lights. On the far bank, the dirt road to the quarry bore fresh tire tracks, layered over the older ones left by fishermen. I turned off my headlights and let the car roll slowly into the tree shadows. The parking lot was empty, save for a rotting wooden guard shack and an iron gate secured with a brand new chain, the cut edges not yet rusted. At the gate's edge, someone had attached a tin sign, "Closed Area Interagency Drill." No logo. I leaned closer. A dot of wet glue glistened at the corner, freshly hung. I circled to the right, where a chain-link fence curved along the hillside, and found a small gap kids used to sneak through. As an adult, I had to crawl, my jacket scraping the jagged wire. Inside, the old truck path was coated in white limestone dust. The damp stone smell clung to my throat. I walked about 200 meters and saw it, 2 parallel tire tracks leading straight to the main tunnel and smaller footprints, size 8 or 9, zigzagging as if their owners were exhausted. I crouched, touched the ground damp, no more than 3 hours old. I switched on the walkie-talkie. Quarry gate secured, transferring to L3. A young, accentless female voice. Completed 789 seats, need 11 more. Another voice cut in, true reports 27 short. Copy. They were talking about seats, like tallying a stadium. I looked up. The quarry's round chamber had a vaulted ceiling. With cots, 789 wouldn't be hard, but what was true? The main tunnel gate was steel, the kind that slides on tracks at its base. Yellow and black caution tape was scuffed with footprints. To the left, a temporary guard post made from a shipping container held a blank camera monitor. But on the desk was a stack of papers, photocopied FEMA ICS 211 forms, the volunteer section crossed out and replaced with contract. The agency field read True Capacity LLC. I snapped a photo with my phone. Last night they'd operated under FEMA protocols, but with a private contractor. I wasn't dumb enough to try the main gate. The quarry had side passages, ventilation, electrical, water. From my mail route days, I knew the town's electrician who talked about utility shafts used to run cables through the old quarry. I circled to a square steel hatch. It was locked with a new padlock, but the label was sloppily written. They were in a hurry, haste breeds mistakes. Next to the hatch was a vent with a grate. I pressed my ear to it, the hum of a fan, and somewhere distant, a murmur of voices. A low drone, stopping then starting again like a crowded hall of people sleeping. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "Don't enter, L3 not for residents." A chill ran down my... I hadn't texted anyone all morning. The number was anonymous, local area code. The message arrived at 7:16 just as the walkie-talkie crackled again. Medical van at side gate, prepped to move light to F sector. Light cases, the elderly, kids. I backed away, ducking into the tree shadows. A white van swerved through a side gate I hadn't noticed earlier. No name on the van, just a small QR code. I raised my phone and snapped a picture. A man in a baseball cap walked beside the van, holding a clipboard, a walkie-talkie earpiece in his mouth. He glanced toward my hiding spot, or I thought he did, then turned away. An old bus's brakes squealed nearby. I crept to the edge of a slope and looked down. In the quarry's valley was a wide yard with portable fencing, lit by stark blue-white LED lights stabbing into the sky. In the center, rows of cots, each with a person. Their faces were turned the same way. Plastic tags around their necks. No one moved. I held my breath. This wasn't a drill. This was a real evacuation of sleeping people. I'm no hero and I don't carry a gun. All I had was a phone, a walkie-talkie, and a gut that kept telling me if I didn't act, no one would. I retreated, sticking to the fence line, searching for a side entrance where I wouldn't end up an unmarked body at the quarry's bottom. At a stretch of exposed concrete wall, I found a utility panel, the kind opened with a universal key. The The post office gave me a set for public mailboxes. I prayed it fit. I inserted the key, turned, click. Inside was a cable conduit running into the quarry's belly. I squeezed in, my back scraping the wall, heart pounding like the drumline at a high school homecoming. At the far end, white light flared. I pulled the cover and crawled through. Ahead was a side corridor. Walls lined with hastily taped signs in black print. L3 right arrow, F ward, true intake. I inhaled, the antiseptic smell stung my eyes. A cart's wheels squeaked. I ducked behind a plastic curtain. Two people in light hazmat suits passed, pushing a medical cart stacked with Roman IV bags. They talked like they were discussing the weather. Friday night's the last round, then clear the conduits, return the site. Brass wants it done before the election. The other chuckled softly, good contract, locals get food vouchers, everyone's happy. Vouchers, silence traded for food stamps. My chest burned with anger and fear. I silenced my phone and scanned the next signs. True capacity load test, keep quiet zones. Load test with people, good God. The corridor opened into a wide space with a low ceiling, where ventilation fans spun lazily overhead. In the center stood a row of folding tables, cordoned off with red velvet ropes like at a county fair. Behind the tables were three people, a brown-haired woman with glasses, a skinny man with a stack of papers, and a bald guy holding a card scanner. They wore thin jackets, no insignia. On the table was a pile of folders labeled EEP Evacuation Acknowledgement Packet. I hugged the wall, steadying my breath. To the left was an intake area. Dozens of people lay on cots, thin Roman IV lines in their arms, faces calm as if napping on a porch. Each cot had an info card with printed names, addresses, and drug allergies. I spotted a familiar name, Mr. Keaton, the furnace repair guy who always chatted with me about the Steelers. His card was stamped light sedation. Light, they called it. The walkie-talkie in my pocket buzzed faintly. I slipped behind a sign pointing to F ward, maybe the family ward. I adjusted the dial, catching a clearer signal. L3 seats filled. Move 27 to F. Tell legal to prep the NDA batch. NDA, non-disclosure agreement. They dress up this drill like fresh paint on a damp wall. We've all seen walls like that. They look new, but touch them and you still smell the mold. I needed proof. At the end of the corridor, a small room was marked Ops, Operations. The door was cracked open, no one inside. My stomach clenched as I slipped in. A monitor split into 4 feeds showed the main gate, the cot area, the bus lot, and something like an underground stadium. Plastic seats in tiers lit by high-powered lights. A counter in the corner read, Load 0816/1000. The way they counted people, like appliances on a big sale day. Left my throat dry. Next to the monitor was a computer displaying a dashboard titled Clear Dawn Scenario B. One section read Rail Plume 1997 Residual Risk Model. A map of Butler County appeared, a red dot pinned on Greyhaven. I remembered, in 1997, a train derailed south of here, spilling chemicals into a creek. The news said it was cleaned up. We believed it because belief was all we had left. The dashboard added legal exposure, high if pipe replacement revealed, minimize visibility via EAP/tiered comms. High legal risk if the pipe replacement came to light, hide it with emergency plans and layered PR. I yanked open a drawer. A scuffed black USB lay inside, labeled CD V39 in marker. I didn't need to understand it all, just get it out of here. I pocketed it, heart pounding in my ears. Just then voices came from the corridor. Ops, anyone in there? My hand grazed a switch and the monitor flicked to a camera in F ward. A row of seats, not cots, high-backed plastic ones like in a movie theater. Each held a person, neck fitted with a monitoring band, bathed in soft light like a church. At the end of the room, a large screen displayed a graph. Below it, response latency under soft disturbance. No screams, no chains, just gentle science, and that's what made it terrifying. I killed the monitor and pressed my ear to Thuyazd. I thought I heard someone in there. Another replied, nah, it's locked. I backed into a corner, scanning for an exit. Above, a partially open ceiling panel led to a drop-down ladder. I climbed up, pulled the ladder with me, and wedged myself into the stifling crawl space. Below. The ops door opened, 2 people entered, their shoes clacking on the concrete. Weird, why'd the dashboard switch channels? Maybe a power glitch. Let's go, gotta write the load report. I breathed slowly. Up in the crawl space, I saw pipes leading left toward F ward. I crawled, shoulders scraping paint, the steel pipes ice cold. At another panel, I peered down and saw familiar faces. The high school principal, the librarian, the new kid at the post office. All dreaming the same dream, one I wasn't invited to. The walkie-talkie chirped, low but sharp enough to jab my heart. Friday night final round, then hand over the pipeline. Media, push FEMA drill on local radio at 6:00 a.m. The female voice from earlier added, make sure to lead with country music. I checked my watch, 7:48. In Greyhaven, country music always plays at 6 to signal a normal day's start. And maybe tomorrow morning we'd hear country music again, eat fried eggs at the diner, talk about the Steelers and the rain. Everything would be normal, except between those songs the world had been folded into a spreadsheet. I dropped from the crawl space back to the corridor. I had to choose, escape now with the USB and a few photos, or push into F ward to find Mom, find Marla, get them out before our story was written for us. My hand tightened around Mom's old kitchen timer. Its second hand ticked steadily, the sound small like a liar's heartbeat. I pocketed the timer and headed straight for the door marked F ward. No turning back now. The F ward door wasn't locked, just secured with a sliding steel bar. I nudged it open and the metal clanged sharply in the empty corridor. Inside was a row of small rooms divided by lightweight partitions, labeled F1, F2, F3. No guards, just a few dome cameras on the ceiling, their green lights blinking like cat's eyes. At the end of the row, a translucent plastic curtain hung partially drawn. Behind it lingered the smell of weak coffee and 3-day-old sandwiches. I stepped through, keeping my body pressed against the wall. The first room, F1, was empty, with plastic chairs arranged in a circle. On the wall, a large screen played an instructional video. This is an emergency drill. Please cooperate. All essentials will be provided. The female voice was soothing, like a Sunday morning church broadcast. Room F2 had people, about a dozen Greyhaven residents, eyes closed, necks fitted with monitoring bands. There were kids too, their hair still carrying the scent of apple shampoo. They breathed evenly, chests rising and falling like synchronized machines. I stopped at the door to F3. On the far cot, under a paper mask, I recognized Marla, the diner owner. Her eyes were closed, brows slightly furrowed. I approached and lightly touched the back of her hand. Warm. A small band on her wrist reed said 1 mg night cycle, signed neatly by a doctor. I bit my lip, searching for the release on her monitoring band. It beeped once, a yellow light flashing. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. I held my breath, pressed myself against the cot's edge, and slid under, my knees scraping the cold floor. The footsteps passed, pausing at the door. A man's voice, F3 stays at full quiet. Friday night's the last round, no filming. The female voice from earlier replied, don't worry, Wi-Fi's off in the quarry. They walked away. I crawled out, exhaling softly. Behind F3 was a side door leading to a small storage room. There I found 2 cardboard boxes with the True Capacity logo. One was labeled Resident Records, the other Gift Vouchers. I flicked on my phone's weak flashlight and rifled through a stack of files. Each contained a drill participation form, a $200 local supermarket gift card, and an NDA. I understand and agree not to share details of internal operations, a signature line at the bottom. I stuffed one file into my jacket. In a nearby cabinet, I found a universal key, the kind for technical locks. I pocketed it and returned to F3. I couldn't carry someone over my shoulder past all those cameras. I knew my limits, what I could do now, mark her. I pulled a marker from my pocket and drew a small triangle dot on the back of Marla's hand. I'd come back. As I stepped into the corridor, the walkie-talkie rustled in my pocket. I switched to channel 7, bus 4 back at the lot, L3 at capacity, moved 20 seats to medical. I lowered the volume and headed toward ops, the operations room I'd slipped into earlier. The corridor turned left, neon lights buzzing faintly. At the corner, a makeshift poster, clear dawn announcement schedule, 6:00–6:15, Greyhaven Radio, 6:36:45, church, 7:00–7:15, high school. They left no gaps. I turned into a side passage and found an emergency staircase leading down. A breeze blew up from below, carrying the smell of salt and rusted metal. From the bottom came a sound, clang, 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 3 beats, a pause, then repeating. It was the same rhythm I'd heard through my earpiece at the quarry gate. No one bangs on tunnel walls for no reason. In Greyhaven, anything that knocks like that is usually industrial machinery, but machines don't pause like someone counting. I gripped the handrail and started down. Another steel door loomed at the bottom of the stairs, massive like an airplane hangar's, painted gray with L3 stenciled along its side. On either side were glass-walled guard posts, shadowy figures inside. I ducked into a maintenance alcove as voices approached. 2 people, a man and a woman, passed by, both in black jackets with no insignia, wearing clear earpieces. Friday night, we turned the site over to the pipeline crew. Yeah, legal wants files closed by Monday. Elections coming, no one wants noise. Locals get vouchers, it'll all blow over. They disappeared around a corner. I peered into the guard post. A fire escape map hung on the wall, main routes circled in fluorescent marker. A swipe card sat on the desk. I tried my universal key, useless. Above the door, a camera stared down. I crouched low, edging along the wall to an emergency electrical box with a red cover. It was sealed with a tamper-evident tag. If I yanked it, alarms would scream through the quarry. I wasn't that stupid, not yet. To the right of the door, a vent slit let out a breeze, carrying the smell of sweaty humidity and disinfectant. I pressed my ear to it, whispered conversations, the scrape of chairs, and faint, scattered applause from somewhere far off, like a midday movie theater crowd. Applause for what? I backtracked to the stairs, climbed halfway, and turned into a side corridor marked comms. At the end was a tiny room packed with blinking network switches. On a desk sat a radio transmitter with a dangling mic. An LCD screen showed a pre-programmed schedule. 6006:15 tomorrow, FEMA announcement, host, Pastor Ray. I snapped a photo, scrolled down, 2 country songs bookended the slot. They'd scripted normal. Under the desk was a box of old documents. I pulled out a stack of resident letter templates. Thank you for participating in the state emergency drill. As a token of appreciation, we've included a gift card. Please refrain from sharing internal activity details to ensure safety. Signed, True Capacity LLC, Clear Dawn Division. I stuffed a few letters into my jacket and returned to the stairs. If I wanted undeniable proof, I had to get inside L3. I traced the edge of the steel door, searching for a weak point. Underfoot was a drainage grate sealed tight. Nearby, an old pipe ran through the wall. Someone had welded it shut, but the weld was fresh, paint still tacky. I pulled out my pocket knife, the one thing I always carry, scraped the paint, and wedged the blade into the seam, prying slowly. The weld popped with a soft click. I held my breath, waiting. No one reacted. I squeezed through head first, shoulders scraping the wall, my jacket hissing against the concrete. On the other side was a circular chamber, high ceiling, tiers of plastic seats. The air smelled of people, faint like laundry left on the line too long, mixed with antiseptic. The floor was marked with white lines numbering the seat rows. In the distance, a massive LED screen displayed a response latency graph and a counter. Load 0893/1000. People sat or lay scattered across the seats, all wearing monitoring bands, eyes closed. Technicians moved among them, taking notes, whispering. I retreated into the shadow of a support pillar. In the 3rd row from the bottom, I saw Mom. Her silver hair was tied back with a green elastic. She slept like she did on winter afternoons, hands on her stomach, lips pursed as if patiently waiting for me to brew tea. I wanted to run to her, but between us stood 2 guards blocking the aisle, hands resting lightly on their belts, no guns visible, but they had authority. I held back, breathing through my mouth, the antiseptic stinging my lungs. A technician clapped 3 times, slow and deliberate, on the screen. The graph ticked up, sensory response data climbing slightly. The room stayed silent except for the hum of fans. The technician jotted something on a clipboard. I got it. They were stirring the sleeping crowd to measure response latency, not testing drugs, but collective behavior under minimal stimuli. The stated reason, to optimize future evacuations. The real reason, to gauge a community's compliance, its tolerance. I slunk along the pillar. Circling closer to Mom's row, a guard glanced over the area, yawning. I pressed my back to the pillar, inching forward. 4 rows from Mom, my walkie-talkie buzzed. I clamped my hand over it too late. The guard's head snapped around. I stopped breathing. He scanned the area, then looked back at the screen. The graph had jumped. He yawned again, bored like any hourly worker stuck in an endless drill. I eased Mom's kitchen timer from my pocket. I clicked it. The second hand started ticking. If I couldn't reach her now, I'd leave a sign. Place the timer in her hand, its steady ticks telling her someone awake was looking for her. I crouched as low as I could, crawling through the aisle, my hand brushing cold plastic chair feet. 2 rows from her, a small speaker crackled. Pause. The lights dimmed. The guard stepped away, heading left. I lunged forward. "What are you doing here?" A low voice right at my neck. I froze. The bald guy from the intake room, the one with the card scanner, stood behind me, eyes half-lidded like he'd known I was here all along. "You're lost," the bald guy said, his voice low, like he was talking to a kid who wandered into the grown-up section. "This area is not for residents." I nodded, swallowing dryly. "I'm looking for my mom. She has a heart condition. I just want to check on her." He studied me for a few seconds, then glanced toward Mom. He exhaled through his nose. "I get it, but you can't stay here. Come with me." The 2 guards in the aisle didn't look back. The bald guy led the way toward a technical area. I followed, palms slick with sweat. Halfway there, I discreetly slid Mom's kitchen timer under her chair, right where she'd see it if she moved her hand. The second hand kept ticking, a steady Morse code signal in a sea of sleeping people. Through a technical area, he opened a small door to a backstage corridor. There he stopped and faced me. "Name?" I gave it. He nodded, pulled open a drawer. Handed me a visitor badge, the back stamped in red with temporary area. He passed it over. "Wear it and listen close. What you're seeing is a drill. Nothing weird, no conspiracies. Everyone will be fine. If you make a scene, you'll panic others. The goal is no panic." "Got it." I looked at him. "You with the government?" "Contractor," he said curtly. "True capacity." "So what's Clear Dawn?" I asked, keeping my face as neutral as possible. His eyelids twitched slightly. "A simulation program, East Palestine, Ohio." "I know," I said. 2023, train derailment, burned chemicals, people coughing blood. They're still arguing over who's responsible." "Exactly," he said. "Clear Dawn's the lessons learned. We need better models, faster evacuations. If there's ever a real spill, wildfire, flash flood, whatever, we need to know a community's resilience. We're doing what's necessary. By moving an entire town while they are asleep." He shrugged. "Awake, they'd resist. Resistance screws the simulation. You want reflex data or political data. If you want an ethics debate, the door to legal's over there. For now, you get 5 minutes. You can look through the glass at F Ward, no touching." He led me to a window overlooking the rows of chairs. I saw Mom. My heart pounded. I pressed my hand to the glass. The bald guy said slowly, "You've got someone in there, I get it, but this is state level. When it's done, they'll go home. They'll think it was a drill. They'll get gift cards. The radio will have a script. We're not forcing silence. They're just advised not to share internal visuals for safety, that's all." "What about the bus logs, the USB and ops, the 1997 spill map? That's safety or covering legal liability?" He looked straight at me, honest for the first time. "Both." I turned away, hiding my eyes. At the corridor's corner, a shift schedule was posted. Friday night, 11:30 p.m., final round, Supervisor Larkin. The bald guy's name wasn't listed. I asked, "What's your name?" He paused, then said, "Evan." I nodded. "Evan, give me one small thing. I want to leave something by my mom. It won't hurt anyone, just something to let her know I was here." Evan hesitated. "No touching, just placing it," I said. I pulled out an old handkerchief with my initials embroidered on it. Mom had sewn it herself when I started at the post office. I unfolded it. Showing him the stitching, Evan stared at it for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. 1 minute. We circled back to the seating area. Evan signaled the guards. I knelt by Mom's row, not touching her, and tucked the handkerchief into the gap between the armrest and the chair's edge. The fabric slipped in, the embroidered corner still visible. I stood, my throat tight with a hard knot. "That's enough," Evan said. "Now you come with me. And forget about pulling a fire alarm. The bells in this quarry aren't the kind you're used to." We returned to the corridor. Evan opened a small door to a side passage. As it closed, he said softly, almost a whisper, "Don't be here on Friday." Then he walked away without looking back. I slipped back into the ops room. It was empty. I tucked the CD V39 USB into my inner jacket pocket, zipping it tight, secure. On the main screen, the counter ticked up. Load 0911/1000, then one more, then two, then three. I opened the transit log, a spreadsheet appeared, bus arrival and departure times, routes, license plates. I snapped photos of each page with my phone, fingers trembling from panic and anger. Every line was a family reduced to a number. While scrolling, I spotted a section labeled QY, young/youth, kids, I guessed. Below it read, keep separate, distinct reflex sensitivity. My throat felt like it was packed with sand. If mom was in L3, kids in Y, the sick in F, they were sorting an entire community like an open-air lab. The mouse suddenly froze. I let go. Tapped the keyboard, the screen flipped to a camera feed of the main gate. A group of townsfolk, 3 of them, stood outside the fence, phones raised, recording. A male voice blared through the corridor speakers. Secure the side gate, text flashed below, alert. The quarry's lights shifted to a dim, harsh, yellow warning glow. I pocketed my phone and left ops, blending into a stream of black-vested people moving fast like a swarm of bees. In the intake area, technicians pulled curtains halfway, wheeling gurneys into rooms. The AC roared louder. The antiseptic smell thickened like subway steam in New York midsummer. I veered toward the comms corridor. The radio room was occupied. Pastor Ray from Grace Church was reading a script. He wore headphones, his voice low and steady. This morning, our town contributed to a state-level drill. Thank you for your cooperation, he read cautiously. Eyes scanning the page like he didn't fully understand, but had chosen to comply. A black-vested guy stood beside him, nodding at each line. I wanted to barge in, yank the mic, but I knew the only way to break this story was to get it out the right way: evidence, logistics, and a spark. I turned on my heel, slinking along the corridor. At a corner, I saw Evan talking to a woman with glasses, the coordinator I'd seen from a distance in intake. They spoke quietly, pointing at a board labeled Friday, Final Round. Evan looked exhausted, like someone who'd stood too long at the edge of a cliff. I avoided them, slipping into a technical passage. A panel hung ajar. Inside was a quarry bell, not electronic, but an old manual one. The pull rope dangled. Evan's words echoed, "The bells in this quarry aren't what you're used to." I didn't touch it. The walkie-talkie crackled in my pocket. Crowd at the gate growing. Call the sheriff. Push the announcement on the Facebook channel. Their layered media plan was ready: radio, church, Facebook. If I didn't act first, the official story would seal shut like a coffin lid. I headed back up the stairs. On the surface, the sky had turned gray. Outside the fence, 3 people. I recognized Barney. The auto mechanic and the Tullivers, a married couple, were questioning a guard. "Where's my wife?" The guard repeated, "It's a drill, go home." Barney's neck veins bulged. "You think I'm stupid?" I stayed hidden behind a rock outcrop, pulling out my phone to record. The guard lifted his walkie-talkie. "Call the sheriff." The faint wail of a county sheriff's siren grew closer. I pressed my back against the rock, heart pounding out of rhythm. If the sheriff arrived and sided with true capacity, the crowd would scatter. I couldn't let the golden hour slip away. I raised my phone, scanning the QR code I'd photographed on the white van earlier. The browser opened an internal login page. I left it, snapping more wide shots: the fence, the interagency sign, the side gate, the white van. I made my choice: go back to Mom's house, grab her laptop, upload the USB, and push the data to places it couldn't be erased, then come back. I crouched, crawling through the old fence gap, slipping to the forest's edge. Behind me, the sheriff's siren grew louder, mingling with the wind whipping through the maple trees. In Greyhaven, the fall foliage is always beautiful, beautiful enough to make you forget that leaves fall because their lifeblood's been cut off. Mom's house was just as I'd left it that morning, kitchen light on, TV playing the Weather Channel. I locked the door, drew the curtains, and fired up the laptop. I plugged in the CD V39 USB. The screen opened a folder /ClearDawn/V39/. Inside were docs, logs, and media. I opened the docs: Clear Dawn Overview, PDF Project Summary, True Capacity Comms Tiered, DocX Tiered Communication Plan. Legal Strategy Memo, PDF Legal Strategy Memo, Evac Model README, TXT Evacuation Model Notes. I started with the overview. It defined community elasticity as the ability to return to normal behavior after controlled light disturbance. The goal: optimize evacuation costs, reduce legal risk during infrastructure upgrades in areas with sensitive environmental records. The page bore the True Capacity logo. Pennsylvania state seal in the top right corner marked as matching funds. The comms tiered file outlined, local radio trusted voices, pastor familiar DJ, church and school in-person announcements, town's Facebook group updates via template, thank you for your cooperation. Gift cards paired with non-binding NDAs, recommended only. The legal memo made my hands go cold, avoid terms like forced evacuation or experiment. Use drill and overnight at local facility. If residents question, redirect pipeline maintenance to infrastructure upgrades per state budget. Optimal timing, midweek night, minimal tourists. In the media folder, I found an MP4 from an intersection camera. I played it. Grainy footage of Main Street at 2:41 a.m. Two buses rolled through, lights off, followed by an ambulance without sirens. Earlier, a county sheriff's car flashed yellow lights, not red or blue. I clipped the segment and saved it separately. I opened the logs. A CSV file detailed hourly load counts for F, L3, and Y. At the bottom, Friday final. A note read, complete by 00:30 for handover to Hollow & Sons pipeline crew. I knew Hollow & Sons, a drilling company with an office in the next town. They'd sponsored the high school baseball team. I started recording a voice note on my phone. Clear dawn load test, communications, legal, 1997 spill. I needed a story tight enough for regular people to share without panicking. I drafted an email subject line for the Pittsburgh Regional News Desk. Greyhaven Town moved overnight in drill to cover pipeline upgrade tied to 1997 spill logs, video, documents. While uploading files to a sync service, my phone pinged with a new message from the unknown number from earlier. Don't enter, L3 not for residents. Now another came, don't upload, they're watching. Meet me at Grace Church parking lot, 9:30 p.m. Someone inside. Inside, I thought of Evan, but this was a different number. I checked my watch, 8:54 p.m. I checked for gun, I don't own one. I grabbed a flashlight, my pocket knife, a thick jacket. Imprinted copies of a few key pages in case someone cut the power. I tucked the USB into my sock, the last place anyone checks. As I turned off the kitchen light, I paused by the TV Mom left on. The weather report droned as it did every night. Tomorrow would be clear, moderate temps, perfect for a town square announcement. Everything was programmed. Everything was normal, except we'd been shuffled like furniture while we slept. I locked the door and stepped down the porch. At the end of the street, Grace Church's light cast a yellow streak across the asphalt. Greyhaven breathed like any other night, except for me and a few others still awake. The Grace Church parking lot was deserted at night, like a forgotten warehouse. Sodium lights cast long shadows over the white-lined spaces. My watch read 9:28 when I shut off the car, letting the engine cool. The church door was locked, but a plastic flower vase still sat on the steps in a clay pot. I waited, hand in my jacket pocket, gripping the pocket knife. 9:31. A figure emerged from behind the church, moving quickly but not rushed. Wearing a gray hoodie, cap pulled low. As he got closer, I recognized the eyes. Evan, you sent the message, I asked quietly. Evan nodded. Not many people I can trust. You're still here, so you haven't sent anything out yet. Not yet, I said, but I've got logs, video, the USB, and I will. Evan glanced around, then motioned me to follow him to a dark corner of the lot where an old silver sedan was parked against the fence. He popped the trunk and pulled out a clear plastic box. Inside was an A3-sized printout, a map of L3. This is the full layout inside, Evan whispered. See these red squares? That's True Zone Tier 3, where they keep people with the highest elasticity per true capacities algorithm. They call it Tier 3 because those residents snap back to normal fastest after displacement, the ones who forget easiest. A chill crawled up my spine. Who do they keep there? Evan flipped to the next page, a list of names. I scanned it, community organizers, fair volunteers, fundraisers, people who stayed positive no matter what. They measure community psychology using the most optimistic people. Evan said, if these folks don't resist, the rest will fall in line during a real crisis. I pointed to a name. Why's Barney on here? I saw him arguing with a guard at the gate yesterday. Evan nodded. Barney's Tier 3. But he wasn't processed last night. He might have dodged the initial sweep. I paused, thinking, what's Tier 1 and Tier 2? Tier 1 is high reactors, usually isolated and calmed with heavier sedation. Tier 2 is neutral. Tier 3 is what I just said. F ward is vulnerable patients, elderly. Evan handed me a small sheet and internal facts. It read, Clear Dawn test results, average elasticity 78%, Tier 3 at 92%. Target 95% before completion. I asked, what's 92%? The percentage of people returning to pre-displacement behavior within 12 hours, Evan explained. They want 95% to call the model a success. We stood silent for a few seconds, the church's AC fan humming in the background. Help me get back in, I said. I need evidence from True Zone Tier 3. Evan shook his head. Not tonight, they've upped security because of the crowd at the gate this afternoon. If you're caught, everything gets wiped. Then what do I do? Friday, Evan said. They'll round up the remaining groups, sort them into zones, then hand off L3. That's when you can record, photograph. Grab everything, but you've got to be out before 0030. I'll handle the access card and distract the guards. You just don't let anyone see your face. I looked straight at Evan. Why are you helping me? He sighed. I signed the contract thinking I was helping, but when I saw my mom in Tier 1, I realized they're not picking people for medical or safety reasons. They're picking for the model. I took the map and facts. Friday, 11 p.m. Where am I? Evan replied, meet me at the east technical entrance of the quarry, where you slipped in before, not earlier, not later. He pulled his cap lower, turned, and vanished into the tree shadows. I stood alone, feeling like I'd just signed a sentence for who I didn't know. I arrived at the post office right at opening, hung my jacket on the hook, and flicked on the counter light. The fluorescent bulb snapped and buzzed, casting a pale blue-white glow across the room. The mail slots were still stuffed, as if half the town hadn't returned from the last drill. Mrs. Douglas was the first to walk in. A small widow with silver hair neatly pinned, she wore the same faded purple sweater I remembered from winters past. She placed both hands on the counter. Her eyes anxious. Do you know where everyone went last night? She asked, her voice low and raspy from cigarettes. Not sure, I replied, keeping my tone steady. Heard it was a FEMA drill. She shook her head, pursing her lips. A drill that took my heart meds. I woke up at 3 a.m., house empty, just the radio playing country music. My pillbox was gone. Explain that. I made a mental note. Did you see anyone else gone? Yeah. Jim down the street, his wife too. He came by this morning asking if I'd heard anything. She glanced around like someone might be listening. Something's not right, son. This isn't like those old fire drills. I nodded slightly, handed her a stack of mail, and let her go. At noon, I swung by Barney's auto shop. The door was ajar, the bell jingling as I pushed through. Inside, the air was cold, thick with the smell of motor oil. The main room was empty. Just a cluttered desk with papers. I called out Barney. No answer. On the desk was an unsigned oil change invoice next to a hastily taped note, back later, FEMA. The scrawl was Barney's, the kind he used for signing off on parts deliveries. I pocketed the note, a small but vital piece of the puzzle. I drove to the diner next. The front door was locked, the interior dark. I circled to the kitchen entrance and pushed. It was loose and opened. A sour stench hit me, spoiled deli meat, wilted lettuce, yogurt leaking from a carton. The fridge was running, but its contents were jumbled, like someone had opened it and slammed it shut. I snapped photos, the empty counter, unwiped tables, plates with food scraps. Leaving the diner, I cruised slowly through downtown. At the corner of Main and Cherry, I saw 3 people huddled, whispering. One was Kyle, a high school kid I often saw at the library. He wore a green hoodie, hands in pockets, eyes scanning. When he spotted me, he nodded, signaling me over. Sir, he said softly, voice shaky, do you know where my mom is? Last night they took her. I asked, staying calm. 2 guys in black jackets, no badges. They knocked, said it was a drill, told her to get on a bus. I peeked through the curtain, saw a strange license plate, not a school bus. I wanted to call you, but my dad said to keep quiet. I studied him. Where's your dad work? Security at the quarry, Kyle said, hesitating. Not in a sheriff's uniform. He said it's a short-term contract. Guarding during infrastructure upgrades. A spark lit in my mind. Kyle, tonight or tomorrow, can you help me? He frowned. Help how? Can you borrow your dad's spare walkie-talkie just for one night? I need to listen to their internal channel. Kyle bit his lip, then gave a small nod. I'll try, but if he finds out. I put a hand on his shoulder, squeezing lightly. Only if it's safe. No one can know about this. He nodded and rejoined his friends. I got back in the car, gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. Kyle could open another door, direct intel from the gate guards. Combined with Evan's map and badge, I'd have two ways in, inside and outside. On the way home, I passed Maple Street again. Mrs. Douglas's house was quiet, curtains drawn, but a small pickup was parked out front, a faded Hollow & Sons logo on its side. The driver, in orange coveralls, was hauling a toolbox inside. Pipeline work, waterline check, I wasn't sure, but it tied to the upgrade Clear Dawn was hiding. As I turned onto my street, my phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number: tomorrow night, 11:00, East Technical Entrance, Quarry, one shot, no guessing needed, Evan. I shut off the car and parked in the garage. In the dark, I sat still, listening to the wall clock tick. I thought of the people I'd seen today: Mrs. Douglas, Barney missing, Marla gone, Kyle worried, Mom somewhere in L3. Each was a node in this web, and I was starting to see its shape. No doubt about it, Friday would be the final play, and I had to be there with every scrap of evidence I'd gathered. Not just to find Mom, but to make sure Greyhaven knew what happened in this little town while everyone slept. That afternoon, I locked the door, drew the curtains tight, and plugged the CD V39 USB from the ops room into my laptop. The screen lit up, showing 4 main folders: docs, logs, media, and archive. Each name urged me to dig in, but I knew I had to read methodically to piece together the whole picture. I started with docs. The first file, Clear Dawn Overview, PDF, loaded in seconds. But it took me minutes to muster the courage to scroll down. At the top, a bolded title: Clear Dawn Project, Community Elasticity Modeling and Emergency Evacuation Optimization. Below it, the True Capacity LLC logo sat beside Pennsylvania's state seal, marked Public-Private Partnership. Digging deeper, I found a summary. Community elasticity is defined as a group's ability to return to normal behavioral patterns after a controlled disruptive event. Clear Dawn aims to optimize evacuation costs, reduce resident resistance, and accelerate behavioral recovery to a 95% threshold. I reread the phrase controlled disruptive event. In this context, disruptive meant moving an entire town in their sleep, locking them into L3 and other zones, and measuring their reactions. Next, I opened True Capacity Comms Tiered, DocX, an internal communication guide. It outlined 4 information delivery tiers to ensure the official story took hold. Local radio, trusted voices like a pastor or morning show DJ announcing the drill. Church and school, brief in-person meetings emphasizing community benefit. Local social media, per-written posts on the town's Facebook group. Thank you for your cooperation in the drill. Gift cards paired with recommended non-binding NDAs to discourage sharing internal visuals for safety. Not one line mentioned residents' right to refuse. I moved to Legal Strategy Memo, PDF, Legal Strategy Memo. The first line hit like a verdict. Avoid terms like forced evacuation or experiment. Use drill or overnight at local facility. If residents question, reframe pipeline maintenance as infrastructure upgrades per state budget. Ideal timing, midweek, to limit external media exposure. Page 2 listed potential legal hotspots. The third entry froze me. Greyhaven 1997 rail incident, vinyl chloride spill. Soil and groundwater samples still exceed safety thresholds. Full replacement of main water pipelines needed to avoid litigation. Recommend deploying Clear Dawn to minimize information exposure and prevent adverse reactions. I remembered 1997 vividly. Local news said the spill was cleaned up. Officials stood on TV swearing it was safe. We believed them because we wanted to. For 25 years, no one brought it up. Now it surfaced as the real reason for this drill. I switched to the media folder. The first video was from an intersection camera on Main Street at 2:41 a.m. Grainy footage under streetlights, 2 white buses with no lights. Followed by a silent ambulance led by a county sheriff's car flashing only yellow lights. One viewing was enough to know I was looking at evidence of an organized, secret, unannounced evacuation. The second video was from inside L3, a high-angle shot of plastic chairs in a circular arrangement. A technician stepped into the center, clapping 3 times. An overlay screen showed heart rate and motion sensor data from hundreds of people spiking, then settling. A caption read, average recovery time, 8 minutes 17 seconds. The logs folder held dozens of CSV files. I opened one labeled load tracking Thur4. CSV, columns listed, bus arrival times, number of people brought in, allocations to FL3Y, and notes. At the bottom, Friday final complete by 00:30 for handover to Hollow & Sons pipeline upgrade. Hollow & Sons, I'd seen their logo on the truck parked at Mrs. Douglas's house. They were already in town, and this whole drill was a smokescreen for replacing contaminated water pipes. I leaned back, head spinning. It was clear. Clear Dawn was both a mass psychological test and a cover-up for legal liability. The residents were test subjects, the town a sealed stage. I grabbed a large envelope, stuffed it with printed PDFs, a USB copy, and wrote on the front, "If I disappear, send to Pittsburgh Post-Gazette newsroom." I locked the envelope in a fireproof safe, along with another USB copy. My phone buzzed a text from Evan. "Tomorrow night, 11:00, agreed meeting point. Bring camera, flashlight, spare battery. Travel light, out by 00:30. I typed back exactly 8 words. "I'll be there, bringing everything." In the room, only the laptop fan hummed, but in my head, I heard the triple metallic clangs echoing from L3 and saw Mom sitting still in her row, a monitoring band around her neck, among hundreds of sleeping Greyhaven residents. Friday morning, Greyhaven woke to the thin light of autumn. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, radio tuned just loud enough to catch every word. At 7:00 sharp, Pastor Ray's voice came through the local AM station. "Good morning, Greyhaven folks. Our town has been chosen again to participate in a state-level emergency drill. This is a chance to hone our community's response to disasters like floods, wildfires, or other emergencies. Please cooperate with all instructions. Upon completion, food assistance and gift cards will be provided to participating households. Thank you for your valuable contribution." His voice was steady, not a single stumble. By the time he said valuable contribution, I let out a bitter chuckle. The surface Clear Dawn painted was so smooth that, without knowing the truth, I might have believed it myself and happily prepped for a drill to earn a voucher. I switched channels. Regional FM stations were silent on the matter. Only a brief Pittsburgh broadcast mentioned, "Several towns are participating in state emergency drills to enhance disaster response capabilities." No names, no details, no visuals. I turned off the radio and drove into town. Greyhaven's morning kept its familiar rhythm. A few shops open, the rumble of engines from the auto repair at the street's end. Smell of coffee from the one remaining cafe, but look closer and you'd see the gaps like empty chairs at a dinner table. Marla's diner was still shuttered, curtains drawn. Barney's house had no car out front. Mailboxes along Main Street stood untouched since the last drill. I stopped by the grocery store to grab supplies, both for tonight and to listen in. At the checkout, 2 middle-aged women were chatting. "Heard there's another drill tonight," the one in a red coat said. The other laughed, placing her basket on the conveyor. "Good, we should know how to react in a real emergency. Plus they give vouchers, who says no to that?" I bowed my head, pretending to check my phone, but memorized every word. This was the Tier 3 Evan described, people who easily bought the official story, even pleased to be rewarded for compliance. Outside the store, I spotted a group of teens in the parking lot, smoking and joking. One bragged, "Tonight we get to go inside the new convention center. Heard it's cool, got AC, free food, just sleep over." His friends nodded, none asking why. I drove home, mind mapping out tonight's plan. According to the USB logs, the final round would start at 11:00 p.m. and wrap by 12:30 a.m. to hand off the site to Hollow & Sons. That meant they'd round up the last unprocessed groups, mostly the wary, the resistors, and Tier 1 people like Mom. If I got into L3 tonight, I'd need to record and photograph everything, locate True Zone, Tier 3, F Ward, and maybe even Y. I needed undeniable proof, images, videos, activity logs, and if luck held, a way to get Mom out. I spent the afternoon checking gear. Camera battery full, memory card empty, tiny mic hidden in my jacket still working, small LED flashlight clip on. I packed a spare battery, 2 energy bars, a 500 ml water bottle, and my pocket knife. Around 5 p.m., my phone pinged with a text from Kyle. "Dad's on South Gate duty tonight. left the spare walkie in your glove box. Good luck. I checked the glove box in the garage. Inside was an old but sturdy walkie-talkie with an earpiece. I tested it full battery, set to channel 7, the same frequency I'd heard their internal orders on before. The sky darkened. Streetlights flickered on one by one, their warm yellow glow deepening the shadows between poles. Greyhaven grew quiet in that small town way, a few cars passing, distant dog barks, and an invisible void between houses. I sat in the living room watching the clock tick down. At 10:30, I put on a dark jacket, soft-soled shoes, and thin gloves. The backup USB and a few printed Clear Dawn documents went into a waterproof bag tucked into my jacket's lining. I stepped outside, locking the door behind me. The cold autumn air made my breath visible. I drove through familiar streets, past the diner, the auto shop. Grace Church with its yellow light spilling across the empty lot. Each place held a piece of tonight's secret. Outside town, I pulled over on a quiet stretch, switched on the walkie, and plugged in the earpiece. Static crackled, then a male voice. Bus 3, confirm 18 seats from Maple area, route to L3. A female voice replied, copy, True 3 still short, 7 seats. I took a deep breath and started the car. My rendezvous with Evan was at the quarry's east technical entrance, the gap in the fence I'd slipped through before. Tonight, the surface reason would play across radio and the town's Facebook, a drill for community safety. But beneath that veneer, another plan would unfold, and I'd be there, watching from the inside. I met Evan at 10:55 sharp at the gap in the quarry's east fence. He wore an old military jacket, cap pulled low. As I approached, he signaled for silence, pointing to his earpiece. A voice crackled through the walkie-talkie. True 3 ready to receive. L3 opens side gate in 5. Evan gave a slight nod, pulling me behind a concrete wall. They're starting the final group roundup. If you want inside, this is your only shot. We crossed an open lot to a side tunnel entrance. The steel door was ajar, 2 workers in reflective vests checking a list. Evan whispered, they think I'm bringing an extra volunteer for inventory support. Keep your head down, wear the mask, and let me talk. I followed, heart pounding. Inside, blue-white LED lights ran along a narrow corridor. The air carried a faint metallic and chemical tang. Evan led me through 3 checkpoints, each with a guard and card scanner. Each time he flashed his badge, nodded, and said the code, Support T7. No one asked questions. When the 3rd door closed behind us, we entered a wider area with a low ceiling and endless rows of lights. Plastic chairs were grouped in clusters of about 20 with aisles between. Some townsfolk sat quietly, wearing masks, clutching small bags. They looked like they were waiting for a long-distance bus. But their eyes were strangely vacant. Evan signaled to keep my distance, then leaned close. This is the transfer point for Tier 3 and Tier 2. After the drill, they'll be taken to a temporary shelter for the night, on paper at least. I recalled a vague line from the USB logs, relocate batch to Y sector, Phase 3 assimilation. The word assimilation sent a chill down my spine. Evan guided me deeper, through a metal door marked True 3. This was my first glimpse inside. It wasn't the conference room I'd imagined. It was a massive holding area with rows of transparent cylindrical pods, each about 2 meters tall, fitted with cables and small control panels. Some pods were lit, with people inside dressed in white, lying motionless. What are these? I asked, voice hoarse. Evan glanced around, then answered softly. They call it state adjustment. They pitch it as an extended medical check. But really, it's behavior and memory synchronization. Not everyone comes out alive or the same. I stepped closer, peering through a pod's glass. Inside was a middle-aged man, electrodes on his forehead, chest rising faintly. His eyes were closed, but his eyelids twitched like he was caught in a vivid dream. Data streamed on the pod screen. I caught fragments, pattern overlay, memory alignment, compliance score. I turned to Evan. Why do this? What's the gain? He sighed. The real reason, test a small, controllable community to scale up later. Greyhaven's just the model. If adjustment works, they'll have populations that think alike, react alike, don't question. His words clicked every piece into place. The drills, the overnight relocations, the disappearances and returns with no explanation. It wasn't just moving people, it was reprogramming them. We moved to the far end of True 3, where a narrow corridor led to a low building outside. Evan whispered, "That's Y Sector." I've never gotten in, but I hear it's where they store and sort data post-adjustment. If you make it there, you'll have undeniable proof. I checked my watch, 11:45. Time was running out. We had to gather evidence and get out before they wrapped the final round. Evan handed me another USB. "If you reach Y Sector, plug this into any machine. It'll auto-download data." I took it, a cold wave spreading through my hand. At the corridor's end, 2 guards stood watch, each holding a handheld scanner. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Beyond that door was the second reason, and the true heart of this entire operation. Tonight, I'd learn why the whole town was relocated, and maybe the fate of my mother. The 2 guards at the Y Sector door stood like living walls. White ceiling light cast their shadows long across the concrete floor, like twin blades blocking the path. Each held a biometric scanner, cables linked to a wall-mounted control panel. Evan leaned in, his mouth close to my ear. "Only 2 ways through. 1, use a commander's internal badge. 2, distract them." He paused, eyes flashing with an idea. "I'll step out of sight and call them to Warehouse B. Say there's a coolant leak hazard. When they run, you'll have about 40 seconds to get in." I nodded, heart racing. 40 seconds sounded long, but would vanish like a breath when every sense was on edge. Evan stepped out, shouting, "Warehouse B's leaking. Fire risk. Check it now." The guards exchanged a glance. One bolted after Evan. The other hesitated a few seconds, but when Evan yelled, "Hurry, need both." He ran too. I dove for the control panel, pulling out the magnetic card Evan had given me. The light flipped from red to green, and the steel door cracked open, releasing a blast of cold air. Inside, Y Sector was darker than I expected, not pitch black, but bathed in a dim green glow from hundreds of screens arranged in a massive arc. In the center, rows of desks held 3 or 4 monitors each, displaying different data: residents' faces, brainwave graphs. Behavioral metrics, a low, steady hum of cooling fans filled the air like an artificial heart beating. I moved slowly, eyes scanning the screens. Some showed familiar faces, the grocery store owner, my old teacher, even my buddy Dylan. Each had a behavioral profile with ratings: compliance level, high; memory sync, 92%; deviance risk, low. It felt like stepping into a factory for new versions of people. In the corner, a sliding glass door led to a core data area. A larger computer sat on a central desk, hooked to multiple external drives. This had to be what Evan meant. I pulled the USB from my pocket and plugged it into a port. A black window popped up on the screen: extraction in progress, do not remove device, blinking as the percentage crawled: 1%, 2%. Suddenly, the intercom blared a deep, urgent voice: "All Warehouse B personnel, return to posts immediately. Level 2 alert." I froze. Either Evan had been caught or he couldn't keep them distracted longer. Heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor. 4%, 7%, 9%. I scanned for a hiding spot. Next to the desk was a chest-high equipment cabinet. I ducked inside, pulling the door nearly shut, keeping my eyes on the screen through a narrow gap. The Y Sector door opened. The 2 guards entered with a man in a long coat. He swiped a card at the computer. I held my breath, but instead of shutting it down, he only checked a few data lines, then left. Lucky for me, they didn't notice the USB plugged into the side out of sight. They exited, but my heart still pounded. I checked again, 37%, 41%. Then another window popped up. Secondary data path detected. Access Y/N. I hit Y on instinct. Instantly, the screen shifted to a 3D map of underground Greyhaven. At its center, a red-marked area, Batch Omega. Zooming in, I saw dozens of pods like those in True 3, but twice as large. Beside them, a description: long-term behavior integration / genetic adaptation trial. A shiver ran through me. This was where people who never came back were taken, not short-term adjustment, but permanent change. 79%, 88%, 95% complete. I yanked the USB, stuffing it deep into my pocket. But as I stood, the room's emergency lights flashed red and a piercing siren wailed. A voice boomed: "Unauthorized breach in Y Sector. All units, lock down the area immediately." I sprinted for the door, but the corridor echoed with rapid footsteps from both directions. The only way out was a large ventilation duct on the ceiling in the room's corner. I dragged a chair over, climbed up, pried off the vent cover, and crawled inside. My body was slick with sweat, heart hammering. Below, the door burst open, flashlight beams sweeping the room. In the narrow duct, I crawled toward the direction the 3D map had burned into my mind. My goal now wasn't just escape, it was reaching Batch Omega before they erased every trace. The scrape of metal echoed in the narrow duct with every inch I crawled. The red glow of emergency lights behind me flickered, a reminder that they were close on my tail. The 3D map from Y sector was burned into my mind. This vent would lead straight to an area off the public schematics, Batch Omega. If the data was right, this was the operation's most secretive hub. After nearly 10 minutes of crawling in darkness, I reached a downward slope where the duct ended in a metal grate. I pressed my eye to it. Below was a massive room, its ceiling so high that the fluorescent lights strung across barely reached the corners. Dozens of cylindrical pods formed an arc. Each stood over 3 meters tall, with thick glass walls filled with a deep green liquid. And people. I saw bodies suspended in the fluid, eyes shut, breathing tubes fixed to mouths and noses. Some still wore everyday clothes. As if pulled straight from their lives, I recognized faces. The old lady who sold pies on the corner, the post office clerk, and Dylan. My chest tightened. Dylan looked asleep, but his eyes were slightly open, pupils slowly tracking me, though his head stayed still. The sight sent ice down my spine. I pried off the grate and dropped onto the metal floor. The faint clang echoed like a hammer in an empty box in the vast room. Approaching a pod, I saw its external panel displaying data. Memory override, 78% genetic adaptation, 45% behavior integration, in progress. Progress bars blinked as if upgrading humans into some new form. At the room's far end, a wall of screens played continuous videos. Each showed social experiments, simulating scenarios, shouting crowds, war scenes, chaotic urban settings. The bodies in the pods seemed to experience it all through neural signals, etched into their brains like real memories. A soft hiss sounded. I spun around. One of the pods was opening. Cold vapor rose, revealing a middle-aged man. His skin was pale, eyes wide, pupils unnaturally dilated. He stepped out, stood rigid, head tilting slightly toward me, mouthing a phrase over and over. We stay, we stay." I stepped back. The man advanced, slow but deliberate. Eyes unblinking. Behind him, 2 more pods opened, 2 more figures stepping out, repeating the same words. Suddenly, the ceiling speakers crackled, a cold voice filling the room. Batch Omega in final phase, all subjects ready for transition. On the wall screens, the image shifted to a map of Greyhaven, routes leading to every home. Red text flashed, deployment in 6 hours. I understood. Everyone in these pods would be returned to town, but not as themselves. They'd be programmed versions, a new Greyhaven fully controlled. I bolted to the central control panel. Data files filled the screen. I searched for an abort option. But as my hand touched the keyboard, an icy grip clamped my wrist. It was Dylan. He stared at me, eyes a mix of pain and something hollow. His voice was soft but clear. "Don't ruin it if you knew you'd want to stay." I yanked free, slamming the keyboard. The room's lights snapped to red, sirens blaring. The remaining pods began opening in waves. The room filled with new Greyhaven people, all stepping out, eyes locked on me. I ripped the USB from the machine, shoved it into my pocket, and sprinted for a rear door, the maintenance level exit the 3D map had shown. Behind me, footsteps moved in unison, precise as a marching army. I threw open the door and dove into a narrow corridor. The speakers roared again. "External subject detected. Activate maximum pursuit." Then the corridor lights went black. In the darkness, I heard dozens of footsteps closing in, but not all of them sounded human. The sound of pursuing footsteps echoed in the narrow corridor, but within seconds I realized it wasn't just human feet. There were heavy, dragging noises, as if something with more than 2 legs was moving. I ran full speed, hands sliding along the wall to navigate the absolute darkness. The corridor seemed endless, broken only by occasional flashes of green from emergency panels. Each flash revealed glimpses of shadows trailing me, gaunt. Elongated figures with arms unnaturally long, joints moving in ways no humans could. I veered into a side passage, trying to throw them off. Ahead was a steel door with an electronic lock. I pressed the stolen ID card from the maintenance room against it. The light blinked green and the door popped open. Inside was an abandoned equipment storage. Dusty racks lined the walls, old wooden crates scattered about, and a few small emergency lights placed haphazardly. I slammed the door shut, locked it from inside, and pressed my ear against it. The footsteps in the corridor slowed, then stopped. Silence. I held my breath, feeling like my blood had frozen. Then a faint sound, click-click, like metal claws tapping lightly on the steel floor, each tap spaced a few seconds apart. The noise circled the door, then faded away. I exhaled, but before I could relax, a soft screech came from behind. I spun around. One of the racks was trembling. Steel bars bent slightly, dust falling like fine rain. From a gap between crates, a pale hand emerged, its fingers so long they touched the floor while the wrist stayed in shadow. Then came a face, if you could call it that, sliding out, a glossy stretch of skin, eyeless, with a mouth extending to the ears, filled with tiny, needle-like teeth. I stumbled back, grabbing the nearest thing, a rusted crowbar. As the creature fully emerged, I swung hard. Metal hit soft but tough flesh, and it recoiled, letting out a low growl that seemed to come from deep in its chest. I couldn't stay. I bolted for a side door at the storage's end. It opened to a spiral staircase descending deeper. Below, a faint green glow pulsed, and a steady murmur, like a voice reciting something in a language I couldn't understand. No choice left. I started down, keeping my breathing shallow. Each step creaked, as if announcing my presence to the entire facility. When my foot hit the bottom, I found myself in a circular chamber, its walls lined with pipes and cables. In the center was a massive tank, at least 10 meters wide, filled with glowing green liquid, dark shapes moving slowly beneath the surface. On the tank's rim, a row of symbols and numbers. Omega batch/final integration phase. A voice came from behind. "You shouldn't be down here." I turned. A woman in a lab coat stood there, her face gaunt, eyes heavy with exhaustion. She didn't seem hostile. Instead, her gaze pleaded. "They're merging everything tonight. Not just people, but those things down there." She pointed at the tank. "If you want to save the town, you have to break the reaction cycle before it completes." I stepped closer, voice hoarse. "How?" She handed me a small device, like a flat battery with a blinking red light. "Place this in the tank's central control panel, but when you do, they'll know." I gripped the device tightly. Above, the sound of metal claws echoed again, this time not one, but dozens. "Descending the staircase." The metallic claws grew louder, echoing down the spiral staircase as if dozens of creatures were scrambling to reach me. Each click-click dragged out, hammering my nerves like cold steel. The woman in the lab coat backed against the wall, hands clenched. She whispered, voice trembling, "You don't have much time. When the device's red light flashes fast, the shutdown's unstoppable, but it'll draw everything to you." I glanced at the massive tank in the room's center. Beneath the green liquid, dark shapes moved faster, swirling as if awakened. An invisible pressure seemed to surge from the tank's depth, thickening the air with a sharp, briny stench. I took a deep breath and bolted for the main control panel at the tank's edge. It was shielded by thick glass, housing rows of switches and screens displaying unfamiliar symbols and data. Next to it was a slot for the device. I slotted the flat battery in, instantly. Its red light began blinking, slowly at first, then faster. A low hum rose from the pumps around the tank, blending with a bubbling roar from the liquid inside. From the staircase, the click-a-click-a-click-a turned into a rapid clatter. I turned to see the first pale, elongated arms emerging from the dark. Long fingers gripped the railing, joints bending backward grotesquely to drag their bodies down. The woman shouted, "Run that way, there's a side exit." I started to move. But the tank's green light flared violently, illuminating the room. From the liquid, massive creatures pressed against the glass, bodies elongated like sea cucumbers, sprouting human-like limbs with long, sharp claws. Their heads, or what passed for heads, eyeless, with gaping mouths full of dense, needle-like teeth, quivered with low growls. The device's red light flashed frantically. A high, piercing alarm tore through the room, stinging my eardrums. Overhead speakers blared an electronic voice. Shutdown process initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately. But instead of fleeing, the creatures on the stairs surged downward, twice as fast, hissing through choked throats. The alarm and green light seemed to spur them on. I grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her toward the side exit she'd pointed to. It It was a narrow corridor lit by flickering emergency lights. Behind us, metal clanged as the creatures flooded the room. A deafening boom shook the ground. I glanced back. The tank's surface had cracked, green liquid spraying like the blood of a giant beast. Creatures slithered out, their slick bodies glowing faintly with phosphorescence. Some clung to the walls, climbing in ways that defied gravity. The woman ran, gasping. When the process ends, the tank will explode, but if they escape first. She didn't finish, but I understood. If they got out, there'd be nothing left of the town to save. A long shadow lunged through the door we just closed, but the thick steel stopped it. Claws screeched against metal, leaving gleaming scratches. We raced down the corridor, up a narrow staircase to the technical level. Through a small round window I saw outside, the town in darkness, but at the square center, a massive metal structure glowed green, just like the tank, only far larger. I demanded, "How many tanks like that?" Her voice choked. "At least 6. All sinking together. A second ear-splitting explosion roared from below. The blast threw me against the wall. The woman collapsed. Green smoke began seeping through the vents. I realized I had minutes left if I didn't want to be trapped with them. She grabbed my hand, eyes pleading. "You have to reach the central control tower. Break the sink there and all 6 tanks stop. It's your only chance." I clenched my jaw, nodding. Out there, howls echoed through the corridors. They'd broken free, and now they hunted anything with a pulse. We sprinted for the stairs to the surface. Each step was a race against time, and the darkness rising from deep below. The final steel door burst open, and the cold night air hit my face, carrying the damp rot of moss and a sharp, briny stench, as if Greyhaven had been submerged under an ocean for centuries. Before me, the scene froze every muscle. The town square was no longer a peaceful place, but a colossal living machine. 6 massive tanks, connected by pipes thick as human torsos, pulsed with eerie green light. The liquid inside swirled, and in each tank, enormous dark shapes writhed. The ground trembled with rhythmic thuds like the heartbeat of a giant beast beneath the earth. From a distance came sounds, metal bending, claws scraping stone, and low growls that vibrated in my chest. The creatures from the basement tanks had reached the surface, slithering through streets, climbing walls, smashing windows, and dragging out anything alive. The woman yanked my arm. The control tower, there, atop a concrete high-rise. A metal structure like a radar antenna spun slowly, emitting light pulses synced with the 6 tanks. I understood instantly. It was the heart of the system. We sprinted through the empty street, our ragged breaths and footsteps on wet ground the only sounds, but a shrill hiss cut through, close to my ear. From the roof of a crumbling house, a lanky creature lunged, its claws slashing the pavement, leaving gouges like plow marks. Without thinking, I grabbed a rusted iron rod from the roadside and swung hard. The blow only stunned it for half a second, but it was enough for us to dive into a narrow alley. The growls grew closer. We slipped through an abandoned service door, through a moldy cold storage, and climbed a metal staircase to the back of the control tower. But as my hand touched the railing, the staircase shook violently. Another creature shot out from somewhere below, clinging to the steps, climbing with terrifying speed. The woman pulled a small steel tube from her belt and clicked it. A blue spark flared, a taser. She jammed it into the creature, and a sharp crack rang out. Its body convulsed and crashed into the debris below. Without waiting to see if it moved again, we raced to the tower's top. The control room door was locked with a keypad. She knelt, opened a device pouch on her hip, and plugged a thin cable into the slot. Code streamed across her handheld screen. In under 10 seconds, the lock clicked open. Inside, green light enveloped everything. Walls and ceiling were covered with screens displaying thousands of metrics, dominated by 3D models of the 6 tanks spinning. Each had a status bar nearing full release. She spoke urgently. "I'll break the sink. You guard the door if they get in." Her words cut off as a roar echoed just outside the corridor. I dragged a metal cabinet to block the door and turned back. She typed furiously, hands shaking but eyes glued to the screen. Outside, the door rattled with heavy blows. Metal bent. Then crash, a pale arm punched through a gap, claws slashing, tearing deep gashes in the cabinet. I gripped the iron rod ready. She shouted. 10 seconds. I smashed the arm, hearing bones crack, but more came, at least 3 or 4, writhing like snakes. 5 seconds. A piercing alarm blared. On the screens, status bars plummeted, green light flickering chaotically. Outside, the creature's roars rose into a hellish chorus. Done, she hit the final key. From the square, the tank's green liquid surged backward, spiraling into their cores. Then boom, each tank exploded, spraying thick white gas. The creatures inside writhed, shrieking in pain, then collapsed, motionless. But not all were dead. Some still crawled toward the tower, slower now. The control room door shuddered. She looked at me, eyes fierce. "We have to destroy the tower if the system reboots." I nodded. Lunging for the auxiliary power panel, ripping out every breaker. Sparks flew and the tower shook violently. The green light snuffed out. We didn't wait. Rushing to a side balcony, we slid down an emergency cable. As our feet hit the ground, a massive explosion tore through the sky. The control tower collapsed, taking the tank pipelines with it. The green light vanished completely. The town fell silent, save for the acrid smoke and lingering briny stench. The cold night wind stung my face, carrying a strange emptiness. She slumped to the ground, gasping. "It's over." I looked around. Creature corpses littered the ground, their bodies dissolving rapidly into black, viscous smears. But in the shadows of a narrow street, I saw a pair of small eyes, glowing green, watching us. I knew this wasn't the end.